As a man, can you or should you show vulnerability in your relationship? If so, when? Today on The Father Show, we're going to find out. Well, welcome to The Father Show. And today we have a fantastic show for you. We have Mr. Ethridge, excuse me. And Hunt is an award winning dating and relationship expert, not just for men, but also for women. He is married and a father, and we would like to welcome on the show because we're going to have a great time today talking about men and being uh, vulnerable in a relationship and how that's going to work. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Hunt Etheridge. Hunt, how you
Thank you
doing
very
today?
much. It's great to be here.
Good. Glad to have you today. So, you are an award-winning dating coach, basically,
hmm
and
Yes.
it's unusual to have a man, and I'm so glad that I actually were able to be introduced to you and find you because since we do a show mainly about men's issue, I think men like to hear from other men uh, things that they should know and have questions about. And today we're going to be talking about vulnerability in a relationship. And I know that's a huge question in a lot of guys' mind. But before we get into that, I want you to introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about you.
Sure. Be happy to. So, like I said, my name's Hunt Ethridge. I am dating coach, matchmaker, relationship expert, advice columnist, advisor, entrepreneur. Basically, anything in the love industry, uh, I have my fingers in it in some. Basically, I love it because my job is to make people happy. And what better job is there to be than to make people happy? Now, I got into this honestly because of my therapist. I was going to her about 14 years ago for various and sundries, as everyone should probably at some points. And she said to me, the men that come in here are broken and I can fix them. But the thing that they want the most is to have a woman by their side, and I can't give them that. You know more about this than anybody I've ever met. You need to figure out a way to monetize this. And the minute you do, I'll refer all of my patients to you. So that was a little surprising. Like, okay, do I know more? Is it possible? Can it be taught? Can it be broken down? Is it a skill? Is it an art? Is it a science? What am I doing? Et cetera, et cetera. So that's at least what started the research and the process. And at that point, the only thing available as a resource for men were pickup artists, Maxim magazine, and Spike TV, which not really going to give a well-rounded man. So it was harder for us to find the resources to figure out what it is to do. The other part that makes it difficult is when you ask someone what they're looking for, and we'll get into this much more, once we start asking some questions and things like that too. But many times a man will ask a woman, what is it that you're looking for in a man, and they'll say, well, I want someone that's kind and sensitive and caring and sweet and attentive and helpful. So the guy says, sure, no problem, and then strives to become that. And then not, he strives and is working at it. And then all of a sudden, guy on a Harley Davidson motorcycle pulls up, and what happens? The woman jumps on the back of that and takes off, and the man is left confused and angry and bitter and I strove to become this, and not only did you not choose me, but you chose something 180 degrees difference. So I don't understand what's going on. So it can be a very confusing time for men trying to figure out what their role is now that being a provider is not necessarily the number one on the list of men. We're given opposite or mixed messages need to be alpha, need to be sensitive, dad bod, fit bod, lumbersexual, metrosexual. Like we're just trying to figure out what our role is, what our place is, and how best to do it. And as it shifts around so often, it can make it difficult for men who historically don't have as high an emotional intelligence or understand the subtle nuances that go on. And so sometimes being confused, they just completely withdraw from the situation because they don't understand it and they're fearful of the outcomes. So my job is to try to make sense of that for my men and try to help the women understand the directions that we're coming from so that we can both happily meet in the middle and both give each other what the other one is wanting.
Well, all right. Yeah. And that's great. And I find it unusual for, in my mind anyway, for men to go to a dating coach, but I think it's great. I know women do, but I think men should because last week we did a show with Lisa Concepcion, and we were talking about how men need to get to know themselves and before you really start dating. But let me ask you, women generally love men who show confidence. How does a man show vulnerability and still keep his masculinity?
It's interesting that you said that because those two things are really intertwined. For instance, all of us have scars, mental,
Mm-hmm.
physical, emotional, what have you. Life is interesting. So, but the most confident people are the ones that will just open up and show you those scars right off the bat because not immediately, so to speak, but they're not afraid to show you their faults because they are confident in who they are. They know that that's not going to change how they feel about themselves, and it's not going to change how they think you feel about them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually it actually is a way to demonstrate confidence to show vulnerability. Now, obviously, the way you do that is going to affect the interpretation of it as well too. Obviously, I'm going to be over exaggerating and over generalizing a lot here, but if you're like, oh, I have depression and it's scary and I don't know what to do. That obviously does not project confidence. We all
Mm-hmm.
suffer from something. We say, yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah. I suffered from depression for a long time, but then I decided to kick depression's ass, and I went out and started working out and got a few new hobbies, and well, it always lingers back there. Done a pretty good job of compartmentalizing it. So it's also about the weight that we put on something. If you want to be vulnerable, let's say you want to say that you had a tough relationship with your father growing up. If you sitting across from the person and you say, I just, I really need to tell you about this, and it really affects me. And growing up, I just really did not have a good relationship with my father. The person listening is obviously going to put a lot of weight on what you're saying because they can see how much it has seemingly affected you, and how you're kind of setting the stage for how you want them to do it. Whereas you can say the same thing and say, yeah, I really didn't have a good relationship with my father, and it makes me very sad, but I'm working on moving on for that and becoming the type of father that I wanted my father to be to my child. So you're saying the same thing. It's just a matter of how you go about saying it as well too. We don't want people to be stones. We want them to share, but the way they share is going to be more indicative of the person than what it is they're sharing.
I agree, and it's definitely a thing that how do you share? So let me ask you, when do you think is a good time to show your mate your vulnerability?
I would say that we want to do it incrementally, but start that process as soon as possible. For instance, when I'm coaching my men, I tell them that there are three archetypal stories that they should have ready to talk about or tell people. The first one is the triumphant story, basically where you overcome the odds and triumph. It demonstrates confidence and leadership. Second one is the happy, joyous story to show that you're capable of deep emotion and you recognize good things when they're there, which opens up and at least starts to show that you're capable of deep emotion and capable of recognizing something good when it's in front of you. And then the third story is the embarrassing story. And that's a great way to start getting into that, because in order to tell an embarrassing story, you have to tell a story where you don't really come out smelling like roses. You're going to be a little bit of the butt of the joke. And that is a great first way. One, again, it shows that you have confidence because you're not afraid to tell this story and show that you have, clumsiness or something like that as well. If you can make fun of yourself a little bit and that you're not too caught up in your head. So between the emotional story and the embarrassing story, they both demonstrate facets of yourself that showcase that you have these vulnerabilities, that you have the ability to open up. Doesn't mean you have to wear your heart on the sleeve all the time. You just want them to know you have the ability to get deeper or to see the world in all its glory, and not just be a stoic man.
Yeah, because you always hear women say that they want men to be more vulnerable and more open and show more emotions, but at the same time, they you can show that, and then that'll turn them off, and they be like, "Oh, he's weak." So,
This is something, yeah, that we're all struggling with, all being, all men and all women in different ways. And because we've got on both sides of the fence, we've got good players and bad players. So yeah, and this also comes in when, like, for instance, like in relationships, the wife says, or, I love to read advice columns as well too, because as someone that gives advice, I would just like to see how other people are doing it as well too. And
hmm
you have these women that write in, the men that write in, how do I get my wife more in the mood? Like she's, all stressed out. And a lot of people say, help out, help out with the chores. Nothing sexier than a man that's helping out with the housework, that's allowing them to have free time. And this conversation went on a little bit, and one of the advice givers, I guess, asked a female, to like, so you're saying if you came home from work and your husband was in an apron vacuuming the floor, that would get you in the mood? Most women were like, yeah, I guess not really, because it's feminizing the man. And this is part of where the difficulty comes in, because we both, so there's masculine energy and there's feminine energy, and we should both have a combination of both of them.
right.
Examples of feminine energy: nurturing, empathy, analytical thinking. Examples of masculine energy: assertiveness, decisiveness, risk taking, things like that. Like I said, we should both have a combination of the two.
Absolutely.
We don't want to delve too quickly or too much in the opposite directions. You don't necessarily want to have a man that has mostly feminine energy and a woman that has mostly masculine energy, but they're both good traits to have. And sometimes when, say, the man is trying to help out and listen to what the woman wants, can unconsciously or unknowingly, unwittingly start delving too deeply into the feminine,
hmm
which then makes her not have that visceral, say, sexual response. And that's the fault of society, both in general, telling us that, say, a man that does the dishes is not a man. A man should be out chopping wood and ignoring his children, you know? So we're all trying to figure out where the roles are, and how it is that we can be better partners, better fathers, more open than, say, the generation above. If we're looking at like the 1950s stereotypical father comes, works, comes home, dinner's ready, waves to his kids, and that's pretty much all the interaction is. Obviously, we don't want that,
Mm-hmm.
because we're missing out on some of the wonderful things of being a father and a companion and part of a family. So we're trying. It's no one has figured out the answer to this yet.
Yeah.
Basically, we're all trying to figure it out, and no one has really got it right yet.
Well, and you said it earlier, you're not going to generalize. And, I always say I can't say all because there's no such thing as really all.
Right.
But do you think that as a man go into a new relationship, should he kind of start feeling out how the woman thinks a man, or what her ideal of a real man is, so that she can kind of tell you whether if you show vulnerability, is going to turn her off or not?
Well, here's the thing: we don't know what we want
True.
in general. So we know what we want, but we don't necessarily know what we need.
Mm-hmm.
And pulling apart wants and needs is always a very difficult thing. Um, so if sometimes if like for instance, like just not even talk about women, just talk about human beings.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, Mike, what's one of your favorite dinners?
Mm. Smoked salmon with scallops.
Oh yeah, that sounds good. Maybe a little capers and lemon in it.
Yeah.
Right. So you want that, but if we were given it every day for the rest of our life, by definition, if we get everything that we ask for, eventually that's not what we want. If we get everything that we want, that's not what we want.
Correct.
And that's a catch-22 in all of human nature. It tends to come up a little bit more for women, only being that women tend to be. So a woman saying this is what I want may not have actually any bearing on whether it is honestly what she needs or wants. It's only what she thinks it is that she wants, which again, therein lies its own problems and therein lies
Mm-hmm.
its own issues, which again, everybody should go to therapy at least a little bit in their lives. Um, so yeah, I mean, what one can do is start to ask questions. I mean, the stereotypical one, tell me about your father. At least you'll have an idea what the template is. If she says he was wonderful, then you're looking to maybe emulate him. If she
Mm-hmm.
says he was an alcoholic and beat me, then you know that you're trying to create something exactly on the opposite side of that as well too. But I found basically that they want a balance. You know,
Yeah.
no one wants a caveman, and no one wants a whiny emotional person.
Yeah.
So it's learning how to join the two of them that can be different, or knowing how to navigate back and forth between, say, the logical and the emotional, which makes it difficult. Um, yeah, because women do four things that women look for in a man, and that's confidence, leadership, image, and power. And we go through and pull those apart and figure out what it means, what the definitions are, and how do we get that, and et cetera, et cetera. Um, but that doesn't mean only. And that doesn't mean, for instance, when I tell men about confidence, it doesn't mean be stubborn or obstinate or unbending. It just means be sure of your own decisions. You can say, yeah, you want to go to my favorite restaurant, Blue Water Grill? She says, I've never really liked that place, or my friend says it was bad. You say, hey man, we can go anywhere you want. All I know is they got the best maitre d' in town. Their oysters are second to none, and their outdoor seating is beautiful. We'll go wherever you want. You're just going to be missing the meal of a lifetime. So there's ways to demonstrate confidence and leadership without trying to be overbearing or uber masculine or what have you. And I think that trying to figure out what is masculine is something that we as men are trying to figure out right now too, because sort of like the definition of masculine is that which men do. And so that's going to change. Before, masculine may have been the stoic beefy, distant man. And that was an epitome. But as things changing as well they should be, so that we can open up and it's not. So basically, there's studies done that that boys are actually more open to emotions up until about first grade than the little girls are. But at about first grade is when they start getting expert feedback on how males are supposed to act. Be a man, tough it out. Men don't cry. Don't talk about your emotions. So it's not the way it is. It's the way we're being taught
Yeah.
that it is.
So,
And obviously, if something's ingrained that early, that's almost an indoctrination.
mm-hmm.
It's very difficult to unindoctrinate yourself on this, especially when many times we will get a little bit of whiplash back, like you were saying, if we try to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I want a man that can cry. Great. He does cry, and the woman looks at him as weak.
Right.
She knows that she shouldn't necessarily be looking at him as weak because she wants a partner that can open up. But logical and emotion don't go together. Her brain is saying this is a good thing, but her heart's going, I kind of wanted a caveman.
So let me
And
ask you.
again, go ahead, please.
No, in that scenario, would you think it'd be the moment in time that you're feeling emotional? So say it's at a movie, or is it at a funeral, or your son or your daughter, just you see her in a play and you just love it so much that you get emotional, and you start to tear. Is there a difference in and I guess that would still be depending on the woman, but you know
That's it. That's it.
yeah.
And it's also, again, how the woman was raised, who were around her.
Yeah.
In many communities, still, men can't really show their vulnerabilities.
Right.
They will get ostracized by their other men. They'll be looked at as unmasculine by the women because there's this hyper masculinity that society tells us, or certain demographics tell us that we need to be part of.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're not part of that, it can be very. So I was reading an article about how difficult it is for boys. There's an article called a book called Girls and Sex and Boys and Sex. I've read Girls and Sex because I have one daughter and one on the way, but I've read a lot of outtakes from the Boys and Sex, basically, and it's saying that most boys are uncomfortable with the locker room talk in high school, college, work, but they erroneously think that most of the people around them are okay with it. But basically, say 75% of the people are uncomfortable with it, but they think that everyone is comfortable with it, so they just go along with it, and you've just got one loud caveman, and so everyone just kind of follows him because they think that's the way it should be, and no one's saying anything differently. Mm-hmm. Now, here's where the problem is. Say we're in middle school or high school. If that guy speaks up, guess what happens to him?
Yeah.
He gets thrown to the side.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because the one making the rules, pardon my French, the asshole, is dictating the mob mentality, so to speak. And because everyone tender age is trying to figure out who they are and what group they belong to, sometimes it's a Hobson's choice, a devil's choice. Do I sit here and listen to women being denigrated and be part of the group?
Mm-hmm.
Or do I say something and become ostracized from the group? And that sucks if those are the only two options available right now. So it's tough. We're being indoctrinated as men. We're being indoctrinated both by society, by our peers, and by the messages that society gives us. So as we get older as men, we have to start unlearning some things and and adding on other things too, because once you get out, say post college, those women are not necessarily putting as much value on whether or not you caught the game-winning touchdown in high school as they did when you're in high school. And kind of just to make a point about what you talked about earlier about men coming for dating coaches. I've had some men that just are clueless and I don't have any idea what I'm doing wrong. I've never had a date. Please help me. Other times I've had very successful men that say we're in football in high school, we're in a fraternity in college, good looking, confident, seeming confident. But all of the women were delivered to them.
Yeah.
In sports, the women, the cheerleaders, whatever came to them. When they were in college in a fraternity, the women came over. So all of a sudden they're in the real world and they've never figured out how to attract someone to them. So they're just completely clueless on how that all happens. So, one of the things I do tell my men is that it's a skill set, like learning a language, learning a sport, like anything. You sit down, you can break it down, you can do it, you can practice it, and you can get better at it. It's not an art. It's not you have it or you don't have it. It's something that all of us can strive to be better at. And it always, always, always comes down to one thing, always, and that's communication.
Yeah.
And we are not taught to communicate well as men.
Right.
So therein lies the difficulty, one of the many difficulties.
Well, and with that, you say men are not taught to communicate. Part of that is showing their vulnerability. And so we don't want to communicate because we are afraid that we might be showing being more vulnerable than we think she wants to see.
Yep. And my wife, luckily, she's very self-aware, but she has caught herself feeding into that. I try, so without going on too much of a tangent, so basically women get affirmations and validations usually constantly throughout their days because women support other women. There's a whole nother topic of how women tear each other down, but that's for another day. But a woman can get a great haircut, goes to pick up some coffee. Girl, your hair looks great. She goes to meet her friends. Oh my God, look at you, you look great. She's getting affirmations and validations. Men, typically, the only people we get affirmations and validations from are significant others and our mothers. So that's where this weird, mother girlfriend thing kind of comes from. So one of the things I teach my men is that we have to learn to start affirming each other and validating each other. So we don't leave all of the pressure on the women to make us feel good about ourselves. And two, we need to learn how to be better as men. So when I get off the phone call with a few of my very close guy friends, say, I love you, says, I love you too, man. Hang up. And a couple of years ago, she's like, oh, you're saying I love you. And then she just kind of stopped and she's like, I just realized that I'm totally feeding into that whole thing. She was just lightly chiding me, but it's all those, one can call them microaggressions, if you will, all these constant reminders that what you're doing is weird or different or shouldn't be done. For instance, also say you're in a relationship, two people had a bad day. Who is going to have the ability to talk about their day more at length, usually?
Yeah.
Because part of our job is to be an emotional sponge. Part of our emotional baggage is to suck up other people's emotions. Doesn't matter if you had a bad day.
Yeah.
Your emotions are not as important.
Yeah. Yeah. As a male and a husband, and you and I both are husbands, when the wife comes home and she's had a bad day, the best thing you can do is just shut up, listen. You don't.
And I remember, and go ahead.
No, I was going to say, for men, we are providers and we want to solve what the problem is. So we have to learn to shut up and just listen. Let her get it off her chest.
Yes. One of the quick tips for men, exactly like you said, because we're solvers and we're doing what we think we should be doing to help her. But like I said, men or women just want to have someone listen to them sometime. So great question is, are you looking for advice, or or you just want to vent?
Great
Because
question.
then at least it lets the guy know what his role is. Um, Hopefully the woman can respond in a kind and open manner and not, well, you should know. Well, there's another problem. But like, if you just want to vent, sorry, oh, well, listen to you. Listen, we all have good days and we all have bad days. You know, one specific time I remember, you know, my wife came home, she had a bad day, she's venting to me, and I said, oh my God, I had a bad day too. She goes, oh, no, don't tell me. It would just stress me out. You
Yeah,
know, okay, then I'll just shut down. You
yeah,
say you want someone that wants to be emotional. I try to be emotional, and you shut it down.
yeah,
So these are, again, this is not typical of her, and she had a bad day, and we're all allowed to have bad days. And she's a wonderful wife, and I could ask for nothing more. It's just that all of those things are the little things that just we as men take into ourselves, that our emotions are not as important. Uh, yeah. And God forbid it's something serious like the death of a child.
yeah.
We need to be the rock for everyone else. We need to go to someone. We have
Right.
all of this grief and sadness and anger, and if we don't go to somewhere, that's going to build up and not be well. So we need to have outlets as well too. And that's why, sometimes if men don't feel comfortable opening up to other men or something, it's why therapy is a good excuse, because if nothing else, it just gives you the ability to vent for an hour without them saying anything. But we need to get stuff. If we hold it all in, and men are good at compartmentalizing, and it's one of our skill sets, and it's wonderful sometimes when we can just, put things in a box and deal with what needs to be dealt with, and then when we have time, then we open the box.
Hmm.
But if we constantly keep putting stuff in the box, in the box, in the box, we're stunting our emotional growth. Uh, we're not sharing and communicating well, and that box is going to explode sometimes. And when that happens, it's nothing good is going to come out of it.
Yeah, you're right, and I agree with you. And I'm sorry that we've come to the end of the show, because I could sit here and talk with you, Hunt, for another couple of hours easily. But I would love to have you back on the show. If you would like to come back on, I'd love to have you.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely. Anything I can do to help, even just one or two people or the next generation, that's my goal.
yeah. Well, thank you for being on the show today. And, it's been a pleasure. I've learned something, and I really hope our guests have too. But I'm sure they have. If you're paying attention, you'll learn something. So, but ladies and gentlemen, that's our show for today. And I want to thank you for being a part of it today, of the Father Show. And I ask that you will subscribe to the show. And if you really liked it, please click on the like button. And if you really, really liked it, and to help us all out, share it with somebody else, because I'm sure there's somebody out there that that could really learn from what Hunt Ethridge has talked about today. So please stay tuned, stay with us, watch the show, tell somebody else about it, and we'll love to see you again next week. All right? God bless.